again. It's February 10th, it's Tuesday. And we're still talking about this uh, federal invasion of Minneapolis and Minnesota and other cities around the country. And a lot of talk, a lot of analysis and expert talking about the political ramification and what's behind this heavy-handed uh, militarized forces in our cities, snatching people from their homes, work, hospitals, schools. Sounds like a third world country. So, really, I mean, I know they changed that. The head of those ICE here in Minneapolis, and they brought Homan, the czar of immigration, and he came, just to de-escalate, as they say, just kind of use the Obama soft deportation method or strategy. Obama, the deporter in chief, deported over 3 million people quietly, and this village idiot cannot master over 300,000. Everybody now is up to arm, and Minneapolis and Minnesota, there's people under sub-zero temperature in December and January out there, thousands, hundreds of thousands protesting and making it clear this is not going to happen. We don't need those ice in our town, in our cities. And I think that kind of overreach by the Trump is backfiring a little bit and backpedaling and changing tactic a little bit. And, you have people getting killed just observing the violation and the violence committed by those federal forces. People getting killed. And on the stream, and you can see it. So it was too much for a lot of Americans to see this actually happening. We have invaded, in Vietnam wars, killing millions there, and Afghanistan and Iraq, 2 millions, and bombing in Libya, Syria, Somalia, Palestine for 2 years, genocide. And people was okay with that. You can rationalize that. People are aware that brown people, savage, terrorists. But this is happening in our city, in your neighbor next door. So even some of the conservative are asking questions. If this is happening to somebody, I know, my neighbor, coworker, or a white person like Rachel Good and Alex Perry or whatever, been killed execution style, what happened next? So it was just very clumsy and primitive. We bring it those racist, overzealous people who volunteer for ICE to have machine guns and a lot of authority and no training, no education. Abuse is going to happen. When the Nazi did their things, they refused to recruit overzealous anti-Jewish or Jew haters. And, you cannot trust those people who hate the Jew because next day they might love the Jew. They might change. And we don't need people with emotion. We need people functioning. They just do the job. Very average, maintain people. They just want to do the job and get bonuses and get raised and be admired by a supervisor. This is the people that are hired for ICE and for Nazi SS. And Obama did that, did it quietly, and nobody paid attention to those millions of people that were deported. But Trump and ICE and all of this happening in the front of us, streaming, it was too much for a lot of Americans to to handle, and people protested, hundreds of thousands here in Minneapolis and Minnesota and Chicago and New York, Boston, even in Dallas, you know. So it is really, the idea is the proximity theory that Zygmunt Bauman talked about. It is just if the crime and atrocity happening in front of you, closer to you, to somebody you know, your neighbor, your doctor, your dentist, who's a Jew, and now you're not going to participate in that. But if it happens somebody you don't know, far away, whatever, it is okay. You look the other way. You play with your kids, you have dinner, you go to Sunday school, and life as usual. But what happened in Minneapolis, it was just too much, not a lot, you know, politically, socially, culturally. And so we're going to talk to about the violation of federal forces of our rights, constitutional rights here in Minneapolis and elsewhere. We're going to talk to Professor Rachel Moran. She's a professor a founder of Criminal and Juvenile Defense Clinic at the University of St. Thomas, a School of Law. Her scholarship, focus on the police accountability and policing reform and public access to record of police misconduct. So she's really paying close attention to what's happening here in Minneapolis, and she is local here at the University of St. Thomas, so she will be the right person to talk to her about the accountability of ICE and federal forces about and the violation that they have and I committed here in Minneapolis. So stay with us. We're gonna talk to Michelle Moran, Professor Michelle Moran, very shortly. Subscribe to my Substack and become a member and support us. That will be great. This is really a great outlet for us without any limitation, without any restriction. We can say wherever we want and share with you some of the content that will not be accepted or rejected by mainstream corporate media. So Substack.com, Ahmedia TV, that will be the place to go and subscribe to my account there on my site, and you get the update, you get free access to all the content I produce, and that will be great, and we really appreciate that.
Hello.
How are you doing? How are you doing, Professor Moran? It's good to,
Good. How are you?
very good, very good to have you. I've been in St. Thomas. I taught there for 20 years, so we are
Oh,
colleagues.
really?
I'm
Yeah.
I'm glad to have you. I made the introduction, introduce you, but when I'm looking at your resume and your background, you're talking about that's comes in your alley. This, kind of looking after police accountability and policing reform and public access. So you have been paying attention to this violation and this abuse that has been happening here in Minnesota since December, and I've heard you talking before, and you describe this as an invasion of Minneapolis or Minnesota in general, federal invasion, and that's this kind of language you only hear it happening to third world country, invasion of Iraq, invasion of Afghanistan. But now Trump might claim that he stopped 6, 7 wars around the world, but he is starting a war on America. Could
Sure. Well, the reason I use language like occupation, or perhaps I have said invasion, the administration itself is saying that this is the largest deployment, is what they're calling it, but the largest deployment of immigration agents in the agency's history. And so the administration itself is boasting about sending a huge number, thousands of federal agents into the cities and into the state more generally. in terms of what they have authority to do, it's not the same as at the border. And I think that's been one of the problems is that they're sending border patrol officers, among others, people who are used to having interacting with people who have very few constitutional rights because your constitutional rights are limited at the border. But then they're sending them into our cities. They're not well equipped or trained to evaluate whether someone is properly exercising their constitutional rights because that's not what they typically do. And so we're seeing a lot of violations, not only by Border Patrol officers, but perhaps especially by Border Patrol agents.
So those guys that run this operation, and I know mostly are political, target certain cities, certain state for political reasons. But from a legal perspective, how this relationship between when ICE joined the Homeland Security after 9/11, whatever, how does it change the legality of it and the makeup of how they do their business?
Immigration, the Department of Homeland Security does have quite a bit of authority over immigration enforcement. That is within the executive branch. And so the president and the executive agencies have a lot of authority over immigration enforcement. They don't have complete authority. There are still constitutional limits on what they can do, but they do have a lot of authority. And this is where things get messy. The state of Minnesota, excuse me, the state of Minnesota and St. Paul and Minneapolis filed a lawsuit. Some people may have been paying attention to it, got a lot of attention back in early January after they filed the suit, saying, you have overstepped your authority, basically, saying, we understand the federal government has a lot of authority in terms of sending ICE agents to the cities, in terms of immigration enforcement generally, but you have done too much. And it's tricky because it's a question about the 10th Amendment and state sovereignty versus federal power. And that's not an area that most lawyers practice in or that there's a lot of case law about. And so judges have struggled to figure out, has the federal government overstepped its authority or not?
What is in a ranking in a legal perspective, executive order on laws? What is legal restriction or framework for an executive order from the executive branch and the other laws that been on the book?
Yeah, I mean, this is a little beyond my area of
Yeah,
expertise.
it's beyond everything behind my area, but that wouldn't stop me from making a fatwa. But anyway, I'm just saying, this guy has been here not even a year, and he had executive order than a lot of president in a whole 8 years duration. So, is the executive order? Is there an outside for it? Does it have a limit? How many executive order can make in a week or a day? So, I mean, I can make executive order. So, what is the Constitution doing anyway?
Yeah, so I'll just speak a little bit to that. I mean, I'm not an expert on executive orders,
Yeah.
but there are no limits on the numbers the president can issue. But I think what's important is that the executive order does not trump the Constitution and it does not trump judicial authority. And so, really, an executive order is supposed to be limited to things that are within the executive's power. So, some of the executive orders that the president has issued are, I think people who are experts in that area would say they go beyond his power. So, like, I'll give you one easy example. An executive order to grant someone a pardon or clemency. That's within the president's power. And people have a lot of disagreements about whether he's exercising that power well. Some people are appalled by the folks he has pardoned who were convicted of high-level frauds and other things, but that's within the president's power. The president clearly has the power to grant pardons. There are other executive orders, like some of the orders he's issued around things like DEI, that seem to be trampling on constitutional protections or judicial authority. And just because a president issues an order, it doesn't mean it has power if it's beyond his authority.
So now we hear things, talking about So we're supposed to have four branches separated, looking after each other, and four or three, I forgot. That's
Three,
three.
three.
So the media is the fourth one. Okay. So now the separation between the political and politics and the legal system, it blurred. It's fair. Now you hear conservative judge. You have judge appointed by Trump. Is a liberal judge. The Supreme Court has majority are conservative. You hear this language, and it's been accepted now. If people issue a law that really oppressive or it doesn't really violate our civil rights, people accept that because it was issued by a conservative judge. So even the language have changed, and the mainstream start accepting the fact activism is common in our legal system. How do you trust that legal system to look after you and protect you?
Yeah, I think it's been harder for people to trust the whole political system, the three separate branches. Perhaps you're speaking to concerns about the judiciary. It has become harder to trust because it seems like our politicians have imposed more of a litmus test on new judges, are essentially asking, trying to suss out whether a judge would follow the whims of the political figure appointing them. And that's really problematic. Our judicial system is set up on having people, the idea that people can be relatively neutral or objective deciders of the law. And more, you're right, that we're seeing some judges who seem to follow the whims of the person who appointed them. But I do want to say I don't think that's across the board. I'm not tossing aside those concerns because they're real, but there are still many judges who appear to be trying their best to apply the law, particularly in the context of, I think that the Trump administration's actions here in Minnesota are a good example. We're seeing a lot of judges in the District of Minnesota, some of whom were appointed by President Obama or Biden, and some of whom were appointed by Republican presidents, who are, many of them have been rejecting the Homeland Security's efforts to detain people, for example, or calling out abuses, calling out failure to follow the law. And that seems to be happening across political party lines or across what we know of which judges were appointed by whom. So I still do think that a lot of judges are doing their absolute best to apply the law, regardless of how they got appointed. But it's a real concern for other judges.
You know, I've been covering and closer. I've been close to what's happening here in our street in our city. I've been worried about myself, my daughter, my neighborhood, and the people who are there. Look like me or people who start trying to be good citizen, try to finish their paperwork, whatever the case might be, and. The police Minneapolis police that claim they are really one eyes out and protecting the citizen of Minneapolis, or they are the same police who killed George Floyd, or they are the same police who has been accused of being brutalized African American and black. So they really cannot claim that all of the sudden they are there to protect us. So what is the role of the Minneapolis police? Why they are not there to be at least a witness to the federal violation? I expect him when I'm peacefully protesting. Federal forces coming to use violence to remove me or take people illegally. What is the role of the Minneapolis police in this case?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think this is it's such an unusual situation to have federal agents come in to a city against the city's will and in a way where the local police aren't sure of their role, right? Like that's a fairly unusual situation. And so I'm not really here to defend or criticize the actions of Minneapolis police in this context because I haven't personally seen a whole lot. So it's a little hard to say. I think that ideally the role of the local police in this situation should be to uh, bear witness, to protect our residents, and at times even to protect them from federal agents. But where the police get confused about that role is, do they have any authority to intervene when federal agents are doing something? Do they have authority, for example, I've heard people calling on the local police to arrest the federal agents when they're violating the law. And the local police, I'm sure, have no experience with that at all. And so they're kind of like holding back, um, trying not to interfere with residents' rights, but also they're not cooperating with federal government and they're trying to sort of like stay at a distance, I think, is essentially what seems to be happening. And you could praise that or you could criticize that. It's a very bizarre situation for them to be in terms of trying to figure out what is their role.
Well, some cities police they actually take an initiative and they don't want what happened in Minneapolis happen to their city. So they became proactive and aggressive in how they make it clear to these federal forces we're gonna interfere if a policeman in Chicago saw a federal officer violating the law, do they have the legal base to interfere and protect their citizen?
My answer to that would be yes, they do if there's a clear violation of the law happening. I think where things get confusing is asking a police officer in the moment who's probably not very well trained in federal law to assess whether the agent is clearly violating going outside their federal duties. So, um, I'm not excusing. There may have been situations where it would have been appropriate to intervene. I can't really speak to that, but I think what the police are not well equipped to do is make that decision in the moment about whether a federal agent is violating their federal duties. And so they're sort of holding back, my guesses, in part because that's not a situation they've ever been part of, and they're not necessarily trusting themselves to make those judgments. But is a legal matter, yes. If a federal agent is going outside of their federal authority and doing things that are not necessary to execute their federal duties, doing illegal things, then the state has the ability to charge and prosecute, and by virtue of that, the local police would have the authority to intervene.
Well, how long you been with St. Thomas? You've been 10
About
years.
since 2018.
So you teach in classes there. You meet 25 students three times a week. So how's your class going, and what are the conversation? What are the concerns of your students?
Students here have the same concerns that students all over the Twin Cities have, which residents all over the Twin Cities have. I'm in downtown Minneapolis. I've seen it too. People are scared. People are sometimes scared for themselves, sometimes scared for their neighbors. People are concerned about what is the plan. People want to know what is the end game of the federal government. When are they going to leave? When are they going to stop committing abuses? I think that we're just a microcosm of the whole community, and there's a lot of people who are trying to figure out how do I respond and what do I do? And there's a lot, at the University of St. Thomas, we have a motto that is all for the common good. There's a lot of people here who care deeply about standing up for their community in a difficult time like this. And it's hard to figure out exactly how to do that, but there's a lot of people doing that in really different ways. Some people are, um, you know, getting food for their neighbors or their community members. Some people are serving as legal observers. They're doing know your rights trainings at the law school. So there are a lot of people who care deeply about doing the right thing in this moment. But as you know, sometimes it's hard to figure out what is even the right thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's not as simple as the student, they want to be in the legal system. They want to they study the law. That they have awareness a little bit than the mainstream people in Minnesota and Minneapolis. So they kind of uh, have some resources to offer and help. As you say, you can be a legal observer or with somebody know a little bit and have some resources to help those helpless people on the street. Do you see how this is gonna end? Do you see how the end game of all of this?
Yeah, I have no idea. That's way beyond me to
Yeah.
imagine the end game. But what I hope is that Minneapolis residents and St. Paul residents and other Minnesotans continue to step up for each other. I mean, that's what's been inspiring in the midst of a ton of sadness is we have seen people step up in really neighborly ways, really compassionate ways, sometimes really sacrificial ways. And I think that's what has surprised the world is that people are willing to make personal sacrifices on behalf of their neighbors who they might not even know. And that's what I hope continues.
Professor Moran, thank you so much for coming, spend some time with us. And I don't think this is gonna, end up anytime soon. And I'm sure we'll have another conversation. Professor Richard Moran is Director of Clinical Education. You really paying attention to to the police accountability and policing reform and public access to record of police misconduct. And thank you so much for spending this time with us and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you.